Okay, we're back. Alam mo, Judge, many years ago, I did a conference in Mindanao. And one of the recommendations that we came up with was to establish an investment fund in trust for the people of the Muslim part of Mindanao. So if there is any kind of economic development by foreign investors or even Christian investors in Mindanao, they will have to earmark, I don't know, X percentage as from that investment fund as owned in trust for the Muslim people in that area. Like that's done by Malaysia. Ginawa ng Malaysia. Anong tingin mo? We were also suggesting $100 million fund equivalent strictly for scholarships for the Muslims, so that they can be taught the sciences and all the other modernities, because I believe that the more educated the person, generally, with a few exceptions, they are the more moderate and clear-headed in thinking. They're not simply emotional religious fanatics.
I'm sure something like that would be welcome by any bangsamoro or self-governing entity that eventually gets established, because
I think
they need all that kind of help that they could get.
To make up for the past neglect and really the rapacious actions there of Christian businessmen. Di ba?
Without it being like some kind of a dole out or hand me down, but also a function of their own self-governance, self-development.
The structure is to be established, but I don't think it needs a peace treaty in order to implement it.
Well, that's in fact what the government side is
trying to do
saying,
now.
Yes, and doing some socioeconomic development efforts. In fact, while the peace negotiations are going on, some development projects are also being undertaken. But the key thing for the Moro side, particularly the MILF, is arriving at the political solution.
Oh. No, I understand that. No, I'm not trying to degrade or minimize the need for political autonomy that they are trying to look for. But on the other hand, we've got to look at it now a little bit also more sophisticatedly. What is your take on if you can call it that, strategic alliance that they say has been established between the NPA and the MILF? Do you put much credence to that thought?
Well, from what I
based on your
read,
studies.
yes, including some of the publications of both
because
groups.
the NPA is certainly emphasized that. Their strategic alliance with the MILF.
Well, from what I understand, it is a tactical, not a strategic alliance.
Play on words.
More directed at avoiding what you call this clashes, because there is a common enemy, especially in their respective areas of operation that might overlap or adjoin each other. But nothing in terms of, for example, a strategic program of bringing down the Philippine government and establishing this kind of system. They're basically going their separate ways with that kind of tactical coordination.
Alam mo, in the end kasi, in any kind of negotiation, the people you are negotiating with, you want them to come from a position of weakness. And maybe that is where the tactical alliance comes in, that if they feel they're able to weaken or soften the GRP side in its armed forces, then they will be able to get their political benefits or political, except that, in my view, although the NPA has said they're willing to respect the
right to
self-determination of the Muslims, I think eventually, basically, I think they will just turn their backs on the Muslims if they think they're in control of the whole nation. and they will just want to impose their own selves as far as that is concerned. Ano ba ang take mo? Are those goals of these two groups at all compatible?
Well, it's very hard to reconcile the very, shall we say, strong centralist
Orientation
of the CPP,
NPA.
NPA, NDF with the self-determination thrust of the MILF side. I don't know if
how it's
going to work out, if ever, for example.
Let me you see. Once when I did this Mindanao conference, I guested a very high-ranking Muslim leader. I will not tell you the name anymore. But we were talking, and I said, ano ba talagang gusto nyo? Ang sagot niya sa akin ganito, Ray, if we cannot get our political objectives, my son will try to get it. And if my son can't get it, my grandson will try to get it. Whatever agreement we enter into with the Philippine government is going to be a purely strategic agreement.
Or a purely tactical
agreement. So not strategic, but tactical agreement. So that means that this is only, getting the expanded ARMM is only a step that with the passage of time, they will want to convert to out-and-out independence and partition of the Republic of the Philippines. And this is where in that memorandum of agreement, the thought did come up to me and I said, wow, who is the guarantor of their independence here? And since if there is any kind of U.S. influence there, and the way the memorandum of agreement was drawn up, it suggested to me, just my own amateur reading, na it will enable the U.S. to enter into all kinds of agreements, tactical agreements with the Bangsamoro entity. Even basing nuclear weapons there, and we cannot do anything. Because the only requirement for any kind of treaty that they enter into is that there is a non-aggression clause against the Philippines. Di ba? So, ano ba ang tingin mo doon? In other words, did the US formally or informally assure them, get into this, I don't care how bad this agreement, get into it, but we will work on it so that 10 years later, or whenever in the future, you will become an independent state. Ano ba ang take mo doon?
You were talking about two things, no? First, the long-term independence objective, and then the second thing, the U.S. role. Well, let me deal first with the U.S. role. No, I don't agree with the view that the U.S. was behind the MOA AD, notwithstanding Ambassador Christy Kelly being in
guest of honor in Kuala Lumpur.
One of the guests in Kuala Lumpur for the
signing.
Supposed signing. I think we should not give the U.S. too much credit on that, particularly the MOA AD. That was the work of the two panels at that time. Maybe there was more influence of the MILF panel than the GRP panel. That's why maybe the language is skewed like that, not so familiar to us. I would not give the credit to the U.S. On that. As for the long-term aspiration of independence, I don't know. It seems to be part of the blood. It seems to be part of the Moro blood. Yes, because of what you mentioned earlier, the history as independent sultanates several centuries before there even was a Republic of the Philippines, no? Before there was a Philippine constitution, no? Which is why they always say that this is a problem which predates the Constitution.
Well, there was some talk, rumors lang naman ito, that in fact, the MILF wrote to President Bush, George Bush Jr. at that time, and made reference to the fact that the Sultanate of Jolo, or of Sulu, was recognized by the U.S. government sometime in the 1800s.
Not only by the U.S. government, but
Ama-
by many other foreign
Oo.
powers of the time. There were treaties between the Sulu Sultanate and also the Maguindanao Sultanate with various foreign powers and countries in the also in the vicinity, and that's part of that history, including that tradition of treaty making. But at least here in the current negotiations, the MILF is saying that they are not going for independence.
No, I know they're saying
Precisely, a sub-state is part of a state. No, that's that
But by whose
term.
definition?
That term, which you mentioned several interpretations a while ago, also has the interpretation that it is a non-independence arrangement because a sub-state is still part of the bigger
No,
state.
what I was-
It's really a question of what the relations, what the power sharing or wealth sharing will be, and that's what's being worked out in the negotiations.
Well, kasi the reason why I think it's important is whatever might be the meaning to the MILF and to the GRP of the sub-state, there is a recognized international definition of a sub-state. And that can, of course, 3 years later or 5 years later, whenever, can be said, no, this is what we meant. And that is a declaration that, in effect, it's not a subsidiary relationship as such, no? But like a co-equal from a political standpoint, if it is not co-equal from a practical standpoint or from the standpoint of either the economy or armed forces.
Anyway, from what I understand,
Oo.
because the GPH, it's now GPH, not
Oh,
GRP.
GPH na, okay.
Peace panel has precisely those kind of objections to the term.
Sub-state.
From what I understand, the MILF will probably eventually concede
Finding another term.
finding another
It's become
term.
odious.
maybe just like Bangsamoro juridical entity before in the case of the MOA AD. But really what is important
Yung
is
substance.
the relations, the substance, the power sharing, the wealth sharing that is eventually defined and mutually agreed. If they can come to a mutual agreement, I think that's still also a big question. That's why the talks have
Ano
been
bang-
moving slowly lately.
Ano ba ang status niyan ngayon? I mean, what do you know what the main areas of contention might be? Is the GPH GPF kind of pulling back a little bit and slowing it down, or there are really some hard nuts that need to be cracked and need time to try and resolve?
The GPH has adopted a position that many or most of the features of the MILF envisioned substate can be accommodated within the existing constitutional framework, and even by passing a new organic act, which amends and repeals RA 9054, the Organic Act for the ARMM. The GPH is saying that it can accommodate most of the substance, power sharing, wealth sharing, within the existing legal framework.
Constitutional.
Constitutional, and it might just entail a new organic
Except that
act.
they have to be careful about amending the Autonomous Act, although they can expand it and strengthen it and improve it. But if it begins to touch on certain constitutional issues, some people might begin to question any such expanded form of Autonomy Act before the Supreme Court as being unconstitutional.
That's always a possibility. But I think the GPH
Uh-uh.
panel, because it adopted that position,
How did
is
he-
trying to frame the sub-state or the substance of the sub-state within the existing
Autonomous
constitutional
limitations. No?
framework. And if ever, at most, it would involve not an amendment to the Constitution, but to the Organic Act for
And that falls
the ARMM.
That falls under the saying there's more than one way to skin a cat.
Well, yes, maybe. But there is also the view,
But can
especially
the,
on the MILF
No, but can
side.
the government promise the amendment to the Autonomy Act?
Well, the prescribed formulation or procedure would probably be recommend to Congress.
Okay. But isn't everybody trying to tell the government, well, come up with what these amendments are going to be. Don't keep it so vague and so secret. Let the people know. What are you recommending by way of amendments to the Autonomy Act?
Yes, in fact, I personally, because I have my doubts that it could be accommodated within the existing constitutional framework.
You and I together.
From my understanding of the substance of the sub-state, I have my doubts, but for now, I'm willing to give the government panel the benefit of the doubt. Show us how it can be accommodated. What amendments to the Organic Act can be introduced that address those main features of the so-called sub-state.
In terms of the political landscape at this time, and I think it's very different from almost 2 years ago, would you say that that's still possible? Politically, to amend it the way the government might want it to accommodate many of the things that the MILF are seeking, do you think the political climate will allow it?
If it's just the Organic Act, I don't think it's that controversial, because as you know, there is also now an ongoing ARMM reform process. It's already underway with the OIC officials in the ARMM, and they're supposed to clean it up, to reform it in time for the 2013 synchronized elections. That's why even the voters' lists are supposed to be cleaned up. Yes.
Well, let me ask you a question. Do you think the MILF looks kindly at the changes in political leadership that are taking place?
Which political leadership?
In the ARMM. Because the administration is trying to put all of their people in. People who have loyalty to the administration, not necessarily to the MILF.
No, not necessarily to the MILF, but maybe
will that not undermine the influence of the MILF within that region? If all of a sudden the administration of ARM becomes honest?
From the point of view of the MILF, the problem is structural, and no amount of reform of the ARM, cleaning it up, appointing good people, will solve the problem of structural relationship between the Moro region and the national government, which is what they are asking to restructure,
but
by way of what they call a sub-state.
But if I were in the MILF, I would tend to question whether that is enhancing to my negotiations or detracting from my negotiations. Because basically, although they say that, eventually if this memorandum of agreement had been agreed upon or passed or whatever, there will be a plebiscite to elect representatives, and then it's almost like a parliamentary system, and then the assembly, those who are elected to the assembly will then elect the prime minister in the ARMM. Now, if there are already entrenched people in the leadership, what happens to all of the people in the MILF?
Well, for the MILF, the more important thing is the peace negotiations, and what eventually this may result in terms of a new arrangement pertaining to the ARMM. For example, a transition towards a sub-state.
Alam mo kung bakit, Judge? Sasabihin nila, kami yung magluluto, ibang kakain. Kasi, but also somebody asked, well, who elected the people in the MILF to represent the Muslim people? They've only done it by the force of a barrel of a gun. Di ba? Or why should they be the ones that will take the stage front and center? Once there is who validates them? What validates them?
Well,
except the power of a gun.
Eventually, there is supposed to be something like a plebiscite or a referendum.
Okay, but all I'm saying is, if you're now putting in people that have done well by the people, it will begin to encroach and weaken their own hold on the people. Okay, makikita nila, bye-bye, mas magandang patakbo ngayon kaysa sa nung kayo nagpapatakbo kung kayo nakikialam dito Wala kayong ginawa kundi mamaril ng tao. Di ba? So, in other words, looking at it as from a political standpoint, from a strategic standpoint on the part of the MILF, are they taking this a quiet attitude towards all the replacement of people in the ARMM because they have no choice?
I think their what you call this point of reference is whether this will eventually tie in with the peace negotiations. Right now, it's not clear. Pinoy is pushing through with his arm reform program, but at the same time, he is saying there is supposed to be a convergence between this arm reform, between the peace negotiations with the MILF, and even with the full implementation of the peace agreement with the MNLF. The government is saying that these three tracks should converge, and of course for the MILF, their standard is whether this serves the agenda of the peace process.
Okay, naman ang sinasabi.
Not arm reform per se, not cleaning up corruption per se.
Although I think that was one of the major reasons why the Muslims have been deprived, because basically the traditional leaders have kept their people poor and uneducated.
Which is why also the government is perhaps saying that the peace process or whatever outcome or future direction of this can also benefit from the arm reform process.
Okay, alam mo lang, sabi nila kasi, di ba, you've heard that statement, the devil is in the details.
Yes.
Okay, so sa akin, let's be transparent, let's be open, and we hope the government will ventilate many of these things that they're proposing to do, the amendments to the Autonomous Act, etc., to see whether in fact public scrutiny will say, okay, this is within the framework of the Constitution. And if there are areas there that are very, very contentious in terms of constitutional interpretation, maybe they should be taken out for a while. But, as usual with most television programs, Judge, we've run out of time. Alam po ninyo, I enjoyed so much talking to Judge, and I hope that you enjoyed it too, because this peace process, especially with our people in Mindanao, it's very, very important. I am less sanguine with the NPA because I think they speak from 7 sides of their mouth. They've got 7 mouthpieces, so they say they have 70 front organizations, and you don't know what they want. They want parliamentary, but I think their objective is still only one, to take over the government of the Philippines by force of arms. And that is what I object to. I don't mind a socialist, I don't mind any kind of political ideology, but respect the people's rights and their freedoms. And don't do anything simply because of the barrel of a gun. That's simply Mao Zedong's doctrine. Ultimate power comes from the barrel of a gun. Thank you for being with us tonight. I hope you enjoyed my discussions with Judge. and that you will think more about the issue of these things because sa darating pong panahon, sigurado ako magbabagayan uli. And now you can hopefully have a better perspective of how to look at things. Salamat po sa inyong pagtangkilik. God bless you. We'll see you next week.
Huling ka ng aso. Lahat ng tinanas.
Hindi nire-release naman ng pork barrel mo. So useless naman.
Mga patay, papabigyan ko ng 5,000 from my... So,
Marami
hindi ko
na nagsasabi na
Hindi. Dahil baka mangyari, lahat ng madi-dismiss, mang-hostage na lang para ma-reinstate.